How thin is the layer of civilization that separates order from total chaos? How quickly can a great nation shatter into pieces and begin devouring itself from within? History offers a horrifying answer in one of the most brutal and often forgotten conflicts of the 20th century. This is the story of the Russian Civil War, an inferno ignited atop the ashes of the fallen Tsarist Empire. Often reduced to a mere footnote after the First World War, the Russian Civil War was in reality a vortex of violence that consumed millions of lives, far beyond the scope of conventional battlefields. This was not simply a war between red and white armies. It was a war where brother killed brother, neighbor killed neighbor, and the lines between ideology, revenge, and sheer survival dissolved into a sea of blood. Like many great catastrophes, it began with exhaustion from a previous war. By 1917, the Russian Empire was utterly broken after 3 relentless years of fighting in World War I. Millions of soldiers had died senselessly in the frozen trenches of the Eastern Front. At home, famine spread, transportation systems collapsed, food supplies rotted in warehouses, while city dwellers survived on bread mixed with sawdust. Tsar Nicholas II, an absolute ruler who believed in his divine right, proved disastrously incompetent and increasingly detached from the suffering of his people. In February 1917, public patience finally snapped. Massive demonstrations erupted in the capital, Petrograd, today's St. Petersburg, beginning as protests by housewives demanding bread, but rapidly transforming into an unstoppable revolutionary wave. Soldiers ordered to fire on demonstrators instead turned their rifles around and joined them. Within days, Tsar Nicholas II was forced to abdicate. The Romanov dynasty, which had ruled Russia for over 300 years, collapsed like a house of cards. Russia attempted to turn a new page by forming a provisional government with democratic aspirations. But the nation was already too fractured. The World War continued to drain resources, and the new government was weak, divided, and incapable of addressing famine, economic collapse, or the growing radicalization of the masses. Into this vacuum of power stepped a small but highly organized, disciplined, and ruthless group that saw its moment: the Bolsheviks, led by a charismatic revolutionary freshly returned from exile in Switzerland, Vladimir Lenin. In simple terms, the Bolsheviks were the most radical faction of Russia's socialist movement. They rejected compromise and believed that a true socialist revolution could only be achieved through the violent seizure of power by a tightly controlled elite of professional revolutionaries. Their slogan was simple: bread, land, and peace, direct, powerful, and irresistible to millions of Russians who were starving and weary of war. On the night of October 25, 1917, or November 7th by the Gregorian calendar, the Bolsheviks launched a carefully organized coup in Petrograd. Red Guard units seized strategic points across the city, stormed the Winter Palace, and arrested the ministers of the provisional government. Lenin proclaimed Soviet power. Ironically, the October Revolution occurred with relatively little bloodshed in the capital. Many believed it was merely another political reshuffle amid post-Tsarist chaos. They were catastrophically wrong. Lenin and the Bolsheviks had no intention of sharing power. They dissolved the democratically elected Constituent Assembly when it failed to give them a majority, banned all other political parties, and created a feared secret police, the Cheka, with unlimited authority to hunt down and execute anyone deemed an enemy of the revolution. They also withdrew Russia from World War I by signing the humiliating Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany, surrendering vast industrial and agricultural territories. These radical actions ignited the true civil war. Across the former empire, diverse groups rose against Bolshevik rule. Tsarist loyalists seeking to restore the monarchy, officers of the old army who felt betrayed, liberals and Democrats whose revolution had been stolen, non-Bolshevik socialists pushed aside, and wealthy peasants, the kulaks, resisting land seizures. Though divided by ideology and geography, they were united, at least temporarily, by one goal: resistance to Bolshevik power. Collectively, they became known as the Whites. Initially, white resistance was scattered and uncoordinated. In southern Russia, Tsarist generals such as Lava Kornilov and Anton Denikin formed the Volunteer Army. In Siberia, Admiral Alexander Kolchak declared himself supreme ruler of Russia. In the northwest, General Nikolai Yudenich threatened Petrograd from Estonia. Yet the first force to truly destabilize Bolshevik control came from an unexpected source: the Czechoslovak Legion, around 40,000 Czech and Slovak soldiers who had fought alongside Russia against Austria-Hungary. After Russia exited the war, they sought to travel across Siberia by rail to reach Vladivostok and continue fighting on the Western Front. Tensions along the Trans-Siberian Railway erupted into open conflict in the summer of 1918. The disciplined Legion rapidly seized control of vast stretches of rail and major cities, effectively cutting European Russia off from Siberia and igniting a nationwide inferno. On the red side, Leon Trotsky, Lenin's brilliant and merciless lieutenant, was tasked with building an army from nothing. Through forced conscription, relentless propaganda, political commissars, and brutal discipline, he forged the Red Army. Desertion was punished by execution. Ironically, Trotsky recruited tens of thousands of former Tsarist officers, holding their families hostage to ensure loyalty. The Russian Civil War was not a static trench war. It was fluid, chaotic, and brutally mobile, spanning 11 time zones. Control of railways meant survival. Armored trains became moving fortresses. Civilians were crushed between factions. Villages changed hands repeatedly, each takeover followed by terror and reprisals. Neutrality became nearly impossible. The Bolsheviks institutionalized terror. In September 1918, the Red Terror was formally declared. The Cheka arrested, tortured, and executed anyone labeled a counter-revolutionary, a category broad enough to include priests, intellectuals, peasants, or former officers. Yet the Whites committed atrocities of their own. White terror was decentralized but no less savage, often accompanied by horrific anti-Jewish pogroms, particularly in Ukraine, massacres that foreshadowed the Holocaust. Between red and white emerged the Green Armies, peasant guerrillas fighting both sides. Some, like the anarchist forces of Nestor Makhno, briefly controlled large territories before being crushed by the Red Army. By 1919 to 1920, famine, disease, and total social collapse engulfed Russia. Typhus alone killed millions. Cities emptied. Cannibalism was reported in famine zones. The Volga famine of 1921 claimed millions more. Despite everything, the Red Army prevailed. The Whites were defeated one by one. Kolchak was executed. Denikin fled. Wrangel evacuated Crimea. By 1922, the last resistance collapsed. From the ashes arose a new state, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. The cost was staggering. Between 7 and 12 million people died, most of them civilians. Industry collapsed. Agriculture failed. Millions of children were orphaned. 2 million Russians fled into exile. The Soviet state was born not through democracy, but through extreme violence. The legacy of terror, repression, and paranoia would shape its future, culminating under Stalin. The Russian Civil War is not a story of good versus evil. It is a tragedy of ideals twisted into fanaticism, of revolutions devouring their own children, and of how thin the veneer of civilization truly is. The fire has long since died out, but the embers still glow, and history asks us coldly, if that fragile layer cracks again, would we truly act any differently?